Hi everybody, welcome to Private Midwives podcast with me, Sharon Gamer. I am a matron here at Private Midwives. I'm also a caseload midwife and carry a caseload of my own along with all the other stuff that I do. Today we are going to be talking about positive birth stories. I don't know about you, but whenever you're in a group of women who've all had babies, the only ones that ever want to talk out are those women who have had really dramatic stories. And so for new parents or women who are pregnant, newly pregnant and things like that, sometimes the only stories that they can get out there are the negative ones or the dramatic ones. So I think for us, it's really important to be able to talk about the positive birth stories. Now we have 3 different aspects today, which is fabulous. We have a wonderful stories of first births not being so great and then having a wonderful second experience. We have another view of 2 very successful and positive induction stories, and also 2 normal, straightforward, spontaneous births in hospital. So let me introduce who we've got with us today. So thank you especially to Maria and Kayleigh because they've been with me before. So it's lovely to have you guys back. Thank you so much. So we have Maria, who has 2 boys, Sean and Paddy. And we also have Kayleigh, who has Noah and Theo. So like I said, they've been with me before, but we also have a new lady with us today who was actually one of my clients for her second baby. So we have the lovely Lucy Scott, who has Aoife and Alfred, or little Alf. So welcome, ladies.
Hi Sharon, thanks for inviting us on.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so excited to be able to bring positive birth stories to the public. It's just a fantastic thing to do. I think there should be much more of it. So what I want to do is I'm going to start with Lucy, actually, because obviously I was very privileged to walk that second journey with you, Lucy, which was a wonderful journey. But what I want you to do is give a little bit of background as to what brought you to a private midwife in the first place, and talk a little bit about Aoife's birth and your experience with that. And then obviously share your positive birth story with little Alfred.
I had Aoife in July 21, and I had planned to do a home birth through the NHS, but unfortunately it just didn't work out. I went 2 weeks overdue and ended up in the hospital that had low numbers because of COVID, and I think it was the weekend of the pingdemic. There wasn't any staff. And then so I had an induction and I was in for 4 days, and it was just sad, not sad, but like I had a really great experience with a home birth midwife that I'd seen throughout my pregnancy, that I'd had a relationship with. And then I was in the hospital and I didn't know anybody, and it was when I first actually got in contact with you, I thought I would go into the hospital, didn't I, with Alf, because I was sort of so disappointed that the home birth didn't work out. I didn't want to set myself up for that to not happen again. But so when I was pregnant with Alf, I obviously got in contact with Private Midwives because I just wanted to try and take away some of that fear by having somebody with me that I knew and that knew me and knew my history, so that if things happened, I'd sort of be able to trust in what that person was saying because they knew me and knew my history, which when I was in the hospital, I just saw so many different people and they all said slightly different things. So, you feel a bit overwhelmed by what advice to take and what the right thing to do is. So we called Private Midwives and got in contact with you when I was quite early on in my pregnancy with Alf. And then, do you want me to go through Alf's pregnancy?
I think the thing is that, first of all, I'd like you to sort of share with the public and who our listeners and everything, what it wasn't just that you were 2 weeks over, was it, that took you to the hospital? It's important because part of that was what created the anxiety and the stress, the second time round, because it was something that was there with you every time I came to see you, especially towards the end of the pregnancy. So let's talk a little bit about what took you to the hospital, because it wasn't because you were 2 weeks over, was it?
No. Well, so it was a combination. So I ended up going in for 2 weeks over for a scan, and at the scan they found everything was fine with the baby, but I had high blood pressure, which they said was pregnancy induced hypertension, which I hadn't had throughout my whole pregnancy. It was only on that day I went into the hospital. So that was, I was convinced it was the hospital and the environment and the stress, but it probably was more than that. But because it was lots of different people, and I just didn't know what the right thing to do was. But it was that whole, I don't want to be negative about it because it's a positive, talk. But yeah, Aoife's birth was really difficult for me because it was just a very long period of time in hospital where I just felt very frightened, and I spent a lot of it alone because of the restrictions at the time. And it stayed with me for a long time after she was born, and throughout Alf's birth, I was very anxious about that happening again with the hypertension and what that would mean for the home birth and if we would have to go into hospital. But you totally helped me with that with Alf's birth and guided me through what.
So obviously Aoife's birth happened and everything else. And like you say, you carried a lot of that fear with you going into being pregnant again. And then you decided, obviously, you wanted to try something different this time. So going with the continuity, talk a little bit about that. So your experience, this isn't the I want to give the three different viewpoints that we're going to get today, but I mean, I think it's important for people, who are in a position to be able to know, to be able to have a private midwife, to know what it's like and what benefits you do get from it.
Yeah.
So maybe talk about that journey after meeting me and deciding that you were going to employ a private midwife.
So yeah, I mean, it was just for straight away. It was so nice to have someone you even took, first thing wanted to know my history and know everything that had happened with Aoife. So that immediately made me feel like you were understanding of what I was, worried about. And you explained one thing with Aoife's birth was I never really understood why certain things happened. And that probably stayed with me for a long time because you just question yourself and you blame yourself and you think you could have done things differently. But having you to speak to, you talked through why some certain things happened in Aoife's birth, which immediately was so helpful. And it was then we just built our relationship over the period of, I think I met you, it was after my 12-week scan, wasn't it? So very early on. And it was just so reassuring to have somebody with me from the very beginning. And you understood, you just knew me straight away and what I was getting, worked up about. And like I said, I had thought I would try to go into the hospital with, just as long as I could have you with me. That was sort of my biggest worry. And I wouldn't try for the home birth. But after, a few more appointments with you and talking about we could navigate things if they did go wrong or didn't go to plan, we then decided that we would try and to have Alf at home with you, which was that immediately put me, made me excited again for his birth and what that could be, which ended up being lovely. I mean, with Alf's birth, it didn't 100% go to plan towards the end. And I think if you actually put my births on paper, maybe Alf's was more frightening in some ways with the emergency at the end, but I've never felt frightened in that situation. You were there with me and you never got, you were so calm that I never felt frightened by the situation. Whereas I had lesser, not emergency situations in hospital, but I just felt frightened the whole time because I didn't have that constant person that was, reassuring me and guiding me through what was going to happen. It's that knowledge of knowing, being told this is what's going to happen, but you feel confident in the person that's taking care of you. It just makes such a huge difference.
I think it's important to put something into context because actually we what happened with Lucy's birth is that we had a beautiful water birth. Alf was born into the water and it was absolutely gorgeous and everything was lovely. And then Lucy was very naughty and decided to keep hold of her placenta. She didn't want to give it up. So, after trying for quite a while, we decided that actually it would be better. Which obviously she needed to go. We needed to get the placenta out. We were unable to get it out at home. So you went in, didn't you? Had it out, had it taken out and then we're home again. How soon after were you home again?
I was home that night. So we were
so
6 a.m-ish and then home by 10 p.m.
I mean, sometimes you can predict that kind of thing. As a midwife, sometimes you can predict whether something like that's going to happen. There was no indication, with Lucy's birth at all. She's very healthy, no, not a smoker, not a drinker, those sorts of things. Hadn't had 100 pregnancies and all those sorts of things, that sometimes you might think, okay, so you're at a higher risk of a retained placenta. There was no reason for us to believe that that would happen, but like with everything with pregnancy and birth, it is so unpredictable. So we dealt with it, we fixed the problem, and you came home, and then hopefully you hold on. And I'm sure, I know you do, so hopefully you
Yeah.
hold on to the birth experience, because that was what I'm interested to ask is, was because I know people will think about this, when they've had either a traumatic or an upsetting, or it just didn't go the way they wanted the first time. When it does go right, do you find it healing? Was it a healing experience?
Yeah, completely. And it's so, I think about it a lot now because, like, with Alf, and obviously having to go into hospital, and I had to have a spinal block and have the placenta taken out in theatre. Like, that
Yeah.
was my worst nightmare. Like,
Yeah.
it was honestly something I was so terrified about. But I don't hold on to it at all the way I held on to Aoife's birth, because it's just the care. The care was so different. I don't have any of the same, like, upset that I didn't get it to go how I wanted it to go. Like, it was just, it really did heal, like, a lot of the kind of things I was hanging on to with Aoife's birth as to why it didn't go how I wanted it, how I'd have hoped it would have gone. And yeah, just the whole experience, like, going into labor naturally was a big thing for me, because I didn't get to that point with Aoife really. And I didn't really believe that I could do that. Like, I just didn't think my body would do it. I just thought I'd go for 2 weeks overdue and that would be the same situation again. And that was really lovely to go into labor naturally and that process happen. And the labors were so different that I put to rest a lot of the blame I had on myself for Aoife's birth, for how I dealt with it, because they just were, night and day in the how they, the pain and the contractions were, it was a different thing because I'd had an induction the first time. I coped a lot better with Alf's birth, and it really helped me to let go of some of the guilt
Yeah.
and things I held over Aoife's birth. So yeah, it was just
That's
amazing.
fabulous.
Look
That's
back on it.
fabulous to hear. Now, I
Yeah.
know a lot of the listeners can't actually see your face, but you've actually smiled. Great big smile. Talking all the way through that, which is just lovely to see. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Lucy. I just want to take on board what you were just saying there about induction, because the idea of induction can be really scary for women. Still all the time, women fear having an induction, or thinking about all the interventions that can come along. We talk a lot about the cascade of intervention that comes from, that first intervention can lead on to the next, to the next, to the next. And today we have Kayleigh with us, who has actually got two fabulous, very positive experiences, both with induction and hospital, like in hospital. So I want to talk to you about that, Kayleigh, so that you can sort of give your perspective on your lovely inductions, your both times. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how they came about, actually? Why did you have inductions?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. So for me, I decided when I became pregnant that I wanted to go down the route of having private care. So like, what Lucy was saying, I had one person looking after me throughout my whole pregnancy who was seeing me regularly, because during that time of COVID, it was just so isolating and I guess challenging in that sense, being pregnant and, the anticipation of what's going to happen. So yeah, and then the reason why I ended up having an induction was because I was overdue. So at 11 days, we made the decision that I would be admitted and be induced. So I was happy with that because I kind of understood, I guess the risks, what the options were. I didn't feel that it was pushed upon me. It was just given to me as this is an option if you want. So I guess the fear of being at home, and I live probably like a good 30 minutes with no traffic away from the hospital, could be an hour and a half in traffic. So yeah, so I was brought in and it was all very planned, very relaxed. I did have to go in on my own. But I guess for me, because I have worked in a hospital, I'm kind of used to that setting. So, and I was used to working there during COVID with the reduced staff and, all that kind of anxiety and stress. And another kind of layer of stress was a big cyber attack that had happened that
Oh
hit the
gosh.
hospitals. So instead of all my records being, in an online file, I was given a hard copy. So for me, the fact that I had my consultant looking after me, and having that kind of, I guess, relationship with him, he knew me, I knew him, and I had my file. There was that trust and, I guess, reassurance. So I went in on my own with my pillow and my bags up to Unit 3 in Holles Street, and I'd heard horror stories about Unit 3, but actually it was very calm and relaxing, and I got the window seat at the end, so I had a view. So yeah, I set myself up and I had the gel, and then 4 hours later I had my waters broken. And just before that, they came in with the pieces of equipment, and I heard someone else who was being induced in a lot of pain. So I remember at that point just being really scared and being like, oh my God, this is like, am I going to be able to manage this? And for me, the experience was fine. There was a little pinch when they obviously burst the waters, and then it was fine. So I didn't really have any kind of major pain for a couple of hours. I was able to eat. The food was lovely. At that point, my partner was allowed in. So they were very strict in terms of how long you were allowed in. But he did manage to stay in a little bit longer. But then kind of security came around, kind of saying, okay, is everyone gone? Kind of giving you the hint. So I was kind of a little bit prepared that he would have to leave. So yeah, they broke my waters, and then a couple of hours later I started to get contractions, probably around kind of 5 p.m. ish. And they were very manageable. So I was, I had my TENS machine. I remember they offered me paracetamol, and I was kind of like, well, no, it's fine. Like, that's not gonna really help or do anything. And then probably around, I'd say it was like maybe 7 o'clock, things started to ramp up in terms of the pain and the contractions. So I was offered pethidine, and again, I had heard, awful stories about pethidine, and I had this gorgeous midwife called Emma who just sat down on my bed and said, look, your body's gonna be able to just rest. We don't know how long this is gonna take. And, she said I'd give you an anti-sickness injection with it. So I said, okay. It was amazing. It just took over my whole body. I still remember the feeling. And I rang my mum, who was like, okay, you need to go sleep now because you're clearly off your head. So I was able to sleep for a couple of hours because at that point my partner, he was gone, and woke up, I don't know, maybe 1 a.m. Again, the contractions were there. So I had my TENS machine, I had my music and all the little, I guess, my little pack of comforts to help me through. And I listened, before I was pregnant, to lots of kind of other mums talking and lots of, I guess, guidance and affirmations on how to kind of get through. And I, using the analogy of a wave crashing, I just kept trying to focus on that kind of visual. And the TENS machine I found really, really good. So around then, God, I think it was maybe 6 or 7 a.m. And the midwives were great in checking in. And luckily, my consultant was in during the night with another mum, and basically said, look, in the morning, if we don't see progress, we'll bring her down for oxytocin. So I kind of knew there was a plan and an end in sight. So I was just managing it hour to hour. And I was brought down in the morning, and it was 3 centimeters, and given gas and air, which was kind of helpful, I think. And then once I had the epidural, it was very relaxing. And at that point, then my partner was allowed back in. And so I was progressing throughout the day. I kind of knew there was a timeline in terms of how long they would leave me before a decision will be made for a section. So, you know, again, all very relaxing. My partner had tea and he was offered biscuits, and my midwife was really caring. And then around kind of say, I think it was like 5:15, things ramped up and it was time to push. So I was pushing for probably like 20 minutes to half an hour, and Theo was born then at
Wow.
13 minutes to 6.
That's pretty impressive, you know, with an epidural on board and first baby. That's pretty good going, that is. Well done.
So yeah, and he was born, he was 8 pounds 12, and I didn't tear. And that was one of the things that I guess from the outset, and all the negative, I guess, information out there, because you know, you're on social media. Like I had to unfollow a lot of accounts where it was very anti-induction.
Yeah.
And I understand that, and I know it's not always positive, but for me, you know, being a new mom and not knowing what to expect, you know, I just didn't want to listen to the negative stories. I just needed to focus on what I could control and what was going to be helpful for me. And I think the fact that I didn't tear, you know, when that was one of the main things that everyone talks about, that, you know, was really surprising, because I was fully expecting that to happen. So yeah, and in terms of my recovery, the only negative aspect was I ended up with a trapped nerve in my leg. So when I was sent home, I actually couldn't walk for a couple of days very well. And once I got kind of good painkillers, that resolved, and then I was totally fine. But when I was pregnant with Noah, then, you know, a lot of people said to me, oh, you won't be able to have an epidural, or, you know, the same thing could happen again. And it was interesting hearing like the different medical opinions as to why that happened. Like
Yeah.
some people felt it was because I, you know, was in labor for so long, maybe with the way the baby was lying, because I was pushing for so long. So, you know, I'm not clear really as to why exactly it happened, and I guess I'll never know, but it didn't happen again. And the reason then with my second pregnancy, why I was induced, is because I had severe carpal tunnel, and
Oh,
throughout my
wow.
whole pregnancy and towards the end, it got so bad I wasn't able to sleep. It was really bad at nighttime. So I was doing everything from physio to acupuncture. I had the TENS machine on it to try and relieve it. The only thing that helped was heat packs. I used to stick heat packs onto my wrists going to sleep. And then when the heat would wear off, I'd wake up in agony. So when I was wearing the splints, everything, and it just got to the point where I wasn't sleeping. So we made the decision, look, come in for an induction, and I was 39 weeks. So I was happy enough with that. And the second time around went so much easier. Again,
Yeah.
you know, same process. In this time my partner was allowed in, got settled. I had the gel, and I decided then, you know what, I'm not sitting in here for hours. So we got
Yeah.
up, we went out, we walked around Marion Square. It bumped into someone my partner knew, you know, so it was kind of lovely. And then when I came back, I started getting contractions very regularly, so decided to have a shower, which I think I overheated myself and poor little Noah, because the contractions stopped afterwards, and my heart rate and the baby's heart rate went up.
Yeah.
So I had no contractions then for hours. So I had another gorgeous midwife who was also called Emma, but a different lady who just said, you know what, get into bed and sleep. So I did that. And again, my consultant was in at about 1 a.m. and he had fully expected me to have the baby before midnight.
Yeah.
So he just said, look, I'll bring you down in the morning if nothing's changed. So again, I knew there was an end in sight, there was a plan. And then the contractions started at about kind of, I think it was 3 or 4 a.m. My lovely midwife, Emma, came into me about 6, and I said, I think I'm due to go to the labour ward. So she said, well, if you're requesting an early epidural, we'll ring over. And I was like, I didn't know that was a thing, but yes, I am. Whatever that is, I'm requesting it. So we got down there, and I had the epidural about, I think the anaesthetist came about like 20 past 7. My partner had gone home, so he came back in. And at about 7:45 before the changeover of staff. They checked me and I was 1 centimeter. And I felt a lot of pressure. And the new midwives came on and they said, at 8 o'clock, I had two midwives called Aisling, both of them. So they checked me at like a couple of minutes past 8 and they were like, okay, you're 10 centimeters. So
Oh, wow.
3 pushes and Noah was out and born at 8:05. So it happened
Amazing.
really quickly in the
Yeah.
end. Again, no tears, all was fine. I was able to walk. There was no issues. And I went home the next day because I just felt like everything was going well. And he, again, like Theo was very jaundiced, so needed light therapy. So with Noah, we did have to bring him back into the hospital just to get checked. So he was fine though. He didn't need any kind of intervention, just lots of fluids. So yeah, so it was overall, I guess, really positive. And even mums I was talking to yesterday, were saying, God, you only ever hear very kind of traumatic
Yeah.
stories. And, even in terms of induction, that we were talking about it, how actually, it's important to hear the positive stories as
It's
well.
so important. Yeah,
Mm.
it's so important. And the thing I can also, part of me can already feel and identify why this was so positive for you, because even at 39 weeks, your first baby, your induction started at 11 days post 40. So you can argue that, yeah, your body was ready to do it anyway, and there you go. But at 39 weeks, like you may have been sort of like asking the body to do something it wasn't quite ready to do.
Mm.
I think it's easy for me to look at, but to think, because birth, labor and birth is very hormonal, regardless of
Mm.
what, anybody thinks. It's a very hormonal thing. And we as human beings, we have this fight and flight, we have this fight and flight thing within us that can make us, if we're scared, we'll close down all those hormones, we'll shut them down. We won't allow them to happen. And so then your body's fighting against something that you're fighting against internally. And that's why lots of inductions don't go smoothly, because most women can be very scared about the whole process. But, listening to you, we can tell straight away that it was something you got your head around early on. It was something you were happy to do. It's something that you trusted in. And that could be argued that that's why it was so successful for you. And I think if anybody that's listening finds themselves in a position where they're going to think about induction, if they can get their heads around it and think, okay, I'm okay with this is right for me, and take away those the fears, then it can be successful for you too. Obviously, you've all had fantastic experiences, and I'm not to take away from those, please don't think that's what I'm doing, but I think obviously I am a private midwife and I do work for Private Midwives, and I think if anybody is interested or feels that they know somebody that would benefit from this sort of care, or wants to have a look at the website. I know it's not for everybody, and I know unfortunately it is a private service and it's something you have to pay for. But if you can't get it in your NHS or HSE trust, and you feel it's something that you or a family member could really do with, please do pop along to the website, have a look at privatemidwives.com and have a look at all the resources and everything. The lovely Maria and Kayleigh both use the website. Actually, they haven't used Private Midwives, but they found benefit from the things that they've seen on our, Instagram and things like that. So it's important to know that private midwives are out there. You can get all sorts of resources and help on our websites, on our social media. So we are private_midwives with Instagram, and it's just Private Midwives, I think, with TikTok and Facebook. So thank you, ladies, so much today for joining me and sharing your amazing stories. I know that people are going to love to listen to them. I've loved it. I could talk to you for hours, all of you. It's just amazing. Thank you so much for coming and
Thanks
talking
so
to
much,
us today.
Thank you,
You're
Sharon.
welcome.